Be an Ancient Faith Today live. There wouldn't even be an Ancient Faith radio. If you're not already doing so, would you please consider giving to AFR? All you need to do is go to ancientfaith.com and click on Donate in the upper right-hand corner. Partner with us and become an Ancient Faith donor today. Be a participant in this vital ministry that has impacted the Orthodox world like no other. Thanks in advance, and may God bless you for your ongoing support.
This is Ancient Faith Today with Father Tom Soroka, a weekly live call-in show addressing the issues of our day from a distinctly Orthodox perspective. You can join the conversation by calling in at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Father Tom is the priest at St. Nicholas Orthodox Church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and welcomes guests from across the globe to discuss important topics of interest. Here's Father Tom.
Welcome to Ancient Faith Today Live. This is Father Tom Soroka, and I'm so glad that you're with us this evening. We'll be taking your calls in a bit at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. Matushka Trudy will be answering your calls tonight, so please make sure to turn the show volume off before you come on air. Now, to participate online, the show is being streamed live right now on the AFM Facebook and YouTube pages. So you can go there very easily and make comments. You can also send us a text message. That's right from your phone. Send us a text message to 412-206-5012. That's 412-206-5012. Of course, you can send us an email at aft@ancientfaith.com, but we would love to hear from you. You can give us a call at 1-855-AF-RADIO. So let's get started. Anyone who has read the first book of the Hebrew Scriptures, that is Genesis, knows that the picture of humanity's rebellion against God's commandment is striking and unmistakable. From the opening pages, after God lovingly creates man, and he places Adam and Eve in a paradise where they can, as the liturgy says, enjoy everlasting blessings and every good thing by simply following the one commandment of God, to not seek after the knowledge of, or more bluntly put, the participation in evil. Man disobeys God, and he's cast out of paradise back into the world of dust from which he was created. And it only goes downhill from there. Adam and Eve's first two sons, Cain and Abel, become the prototypes of a struggle of man against man, of brother against brother. And it ends in Cain killing his brother Abel, and then Cain lies to God about it. And the story of humanity only spins out of control after this tenuous and ignoble beginning. And by chapter 6 of Genesis, the Bible says, quote, "Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." This pathos, of course, isn't limited to the scriptures. It's captured the imagination of talented writers and artists who portray this ancient problem of sin in a variety of ways. And tonight, we want to explore how these eternal truths can be portrayed in fictional stories as well as visual art, and how these ancient and profound truths can actually be presented to a wider audience, some of whom might otherwise ignore the simply standard biblical narrative, and thereby bringing to them a redemptive knowledge of God. So tonight we're honored to have with us an accomplished author and illustrator, Vesper Stamper. Born in Germany and raised in New York City, Vesper writes and illustrates novels which tell through both words and pictures stories of history's rhymes. Her debut illustrated young adult novel, What the Night Sings, about the aftermath of the Holocaust, seen through the eyes of a young musician, was named one of the best young adult books of 2018-19 by the Wall Street Journal. Her latest work, the highly anticipated Berliners, about two brothers caught in the conflict between East and West Germany, was just released, published by Knopf. Vesper holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts in illustration from Parsons and a master's from the School of Visual Arts. And she's the host of the podcast Vesperisms, the art of thinking for yourself. And so we're honored to have her here tonight. Vesper, welcome to Ancient Faith Today.
Thanks so much for having me, Father Tom. It's great to be here.
I'm really glad that you're here. And we met each other in a very kind of serendipitous way. We met each other through classes that were being actually sponsored by a Jewish organization, and I was teaching about Orthodox Christianity. And at that time, I think you were exploring Orthodoxy and were getting ready to enter into the church. And you have become an Orthodox Christian, I believe you and your family, just recently, maybe, I think it was in February. Is that correct?
Actually, it was just in September that we were
Oh
christened.
my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
It's quite fresh.
It was quite fresh. Chrism is still wet on your head. That's fantastic.
That's right.
Well, first of all, congratulations and God bless you. And may God grant you many years of good service within the church. So before we get to your work and your novel and the topic that we want to talk about tonight, I really want to hear about your journey to the Orthodox faith. Can you tell us a little bit about your religious upbringing and your background? I know that you were born in Germany, not sure kind of how that fits into everything, but can you tell us how you ended up in the Orthodox Church?
Well, do we have 4 hours? I think it's a pretty
well,
no, I'll try to give you the digest version of it. But
honestly, as I said to you previously, we love to hear these stories, and I know that there's a lot of details, but sort of give us the parts that are the most sort of edifying and that will help the most people, because there's a lot of people that I'm sure are fans of yours. There are people that want to learn more about you. And in the future, as they're listening to these podcasts, and I'm hoping many people will go out and buy your book, Berliners. It's a fantastic read. It's very compelling. But to have you as an Orthodox Christian really is a great benefit to Christ and the church, because now you can also use your talents for the glory of God. So with that, please tell us how you came to the church. I would love to hear your spiritual journey.
Thank you. And I hope as a writer, I've learned to have a certain economy of words. So I will try to give you just the salient points. So
thanks.
So I was born in Germany on an army base. I'm not of German heritage, but my father was in the army. My mother was quite young. She was a teenager. And my father was not a good man. And so my mother escaped with me under much duress and back to New York City, where I'm a third generation New Yorker. And so I didn't have much memory of Germany, except that it did kind of get into my bones a bit. In any case, I was raised by my single mom and my grandparents, who were Episcopalians. And when I was 4, my mother married a Jewish man and converted to Judaism. And so from 4 on, I was raised in a Reformed Jewish household. And my
Mm.
home life was, let's say, it was pretty dark. There was a lot of darkness in my childhood.
Mm.
And when I was, I really didn't want very much to do with my Jewish upbringing. It's kind of the problem with conversion to anything where people are cradle, you're coming into a
Right,
cradle community,
right.
um, where the convert can sometimes feel, a sense of unrootedness or lack, or
Sure,
unwelcome, whether
sure.
that's just perceived or whether that's actually, the case. But, as a kid, I just really didn't feel much of a connection there. Um,
Mhm.
and because my home life was so fraught, it really wasn't the most positive experience at the time.
Yeah.
Well, fast forward to high school, I went to an arts high school in Manhattan. And around that time, when I was about 13, I started dabbling uh, in the occult and in witchcraft and in Eastern
Oh,
mysticism
wow.
very, very heavily. I would say I was a very heavy user.
Wow.
And I think that what appealed to me about that was this real sense of control, the sort of promises of control around a life that was very much out of control around me. And so for about 3 years, I was really, really heavily involved in the occult and in Eastern mysticism. And I had good friends, though, that I did theater with, and they happened to be going to this youth group. And, they wanted me to come with them, and I thought it was for the birds, But eventually
Sure,
they
right.
convinced me to come. And while I was in that little Lutheran Brethren church basement, I got a heavy, heavy dose of scripture. The the leadership of that youth group was so incredible in really getting the scriptures into kids' heads. Memorizing scripture is really,
Mhm.
really marvelous. It wasn't just about the fun and games, although we did have a lot of good fun and games. Well, anyway, fast forward to I was heading toward the end of my junior year.
And so you were
And
returning to this were you returning to the youth group? Like, you were invited
yeah,
and
yeah, I
your
was coming. I was
initial
at that point.
wow,
Yeah, I was going every week at that point, and my
wow.
main focus of going to that youth group was uh, having fun with my friends and arguing with the leaders, and trying to tell them what was what. Um,
Right, right.
which is, not much has changed, but let's say, but they really respected me. I mean, I really
That's
felt
great.
a deep sense of respect from these leaders. They never talked down to me. They never patronized me. They entertained my questions as earnest and real, which they
Interesting.
were. And so they just loved me, and
It's a
I
good
was I
lesson.
felt part of it, even though, yeah, even if I wasn't part of what they believed, I was part of them, and I really felt that they very much did love me.
Good
So
for them.
one night I yeah. So one night I had kind of a troubling experience with a friend of mine who was actually pressuring me into some things that I didn't want to do. I'll just put it that way. And
Sure.
it happened to be youth group night, and so I went upstairs and I asked this guy's mom to please drive me to youth group. I said I have something to do. I have to get to, and so she drove me to youth group, and I felt so conflicted or ashamed. I couldn't really even name the emotion that I was going through. But it was just this deep alienation. And I went into the church, and the way the church was set up was there was uh, a staircase going down to the basement and a staircase going up to the sanctuary, but in between was this vestibule with stairs. And
Okay.
I could hear the kids playing around in the basement, having youth group and singing their songs and everything. And I felt I could not go down there for anything because as I sat on the steps in that little vestibule, I can only describe it as looking over the abyss. And just just something opened up in my soul that was so dark and so deep. And I felt I had no reason to do good, no reason to do evil. I had nothing guiding my life, nothing guiding my choices. There was really no point. And it wasn't as though things were going so bad in my life. My life was fine, but it was this
Okay.
deep sense of emptiness that I just had no reason for anything.
And
And
were you
so
aware of it before that? Were you aware of that emptiness, that it just sort of built up
no,
in you, or did it just kind of hit you?
it hit me all at once. It was really out of nowhere.
Wow.
And so one of the youth group leaders came up to, to get something out of the sanctuary or something, and saw me sitting there. And I was just bawling. And he just sat with me. He didn't say anything to me. He just let me cry and cry and cry. I was so distraught, I couldn't even get a word out.
Wow.
So he asked me, do you want to go in the sanctuary? Maybe so the other kids won't see you crying, or so that I don't think he was
Right.
embarrassed, but it was just more for me. So we went up to the sanctuary and again, just kept bawling my eyes out, didn't know what to do. I was just so confused and so lost.
Mm-hmm.
And he just very gently said 4 words that changed my life. He just said, "Do you want Jesus?" And it was like, Father Tom, I can only describe it as that everything in my universe rushed together like into one word from me, which was yes.
Wow.
And that was it. And at that moment, I actually had a vision. And, you have to understand, I was not somebody who was like deeply steeped in Christianity at all,
Right. Right. Right.
other than culturally through my grandparents somewhat. But I just never thought about it. I never thought about it, never thought about him. But at that moment that I said yes, I had this vision and I was really transported to the foot of the cross. And all I saw were Jesus's feet on the cross. And in this vision, I was wadding up pieces of paper and hurling them full force at his feet. And
Wow.
all these crumpled up pieces of paper were building up and building up and building up. And the second they touched his little pinky toe, it all vanished. And then I did it again, crumbling up pieces of paper, hurling, 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 building up, building up. And as soon as they touched his toe, gone. And then I sort of came out of it, was kind of like, whoa, what was that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Right.
this very wonderful youth group leader handed me a Bible out of the pew, because I didn't have one at home. And I went home that night and I knew something had happened to me. And I read that Bible all night long. And I didn't stop for years. Um, and that night my life was utterly, completely changed.
That's
Um,
amazing.
and so that was, 1993. And
And
I've
so
been walking with the
obviously
Lord.
you gave up
Yeah.
your the Eastern mysticism
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
the occult practices at that point. You sort
It
of knew
probably
that that
took
was
about a
wrong.
year. Yeah. I would say it took about a year to sort of like uh transition over to like as I read the scriptures, I quickly understood, okay,
Right.
no, it's these things are not compatible. And plus, I really met the Lord that day, um in a
Sure.
very, very tangible, palpable way,
Yes.
where I heard the voice of my shepherd and went running, with him. So it didn't take very long. And, also I was in an art school at the time. And so, and I was surrounded by other Christians, which might surprise people. But
Yeah, very
because,
much.
but yeah. Yeah. Well, New York is like that. It's a surprising place. I think people who come to New York kind of come there to lose their faith, but people who have lived there, for multiple generations, there's a very vibrant church life in the city.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I was really surrounded by a lot of Christians, mostly from the Black church. And so those were really my formative years um, in the faith. So anyway, fast forward, I met my husband in college. We got married. We've been married for 23 years yesterday, actually, 24 years. And so, and he's a Christian as well. And so, we raised a family. I'm really skipping ahead here. We raised a family. We moved out of New York City, and we were looking for a church home. And at this point, we were not Orthodox. Um, we were just looking for anywhere that had a sense of any community that really had a sense of who they were. And we just kept coming upon community after community that felt like they were preaching to people who were not there.
Hmm.
And they were lovely people. Some of the churches were big and some of them were tiny, all lovely people, still friends. But it was difficult to find a home, especially because we were new to the area where we live and everything. And so it was actually through Jonathan Pajot, who I met and did a couple
Yes.
podcasts with. Yeah.
Hmm.
And when I was researching for my second book, A Cloud of Outrageous Blue, so it's a book about the plague in 1348, which happened to come out
Yes.
in 2020, surprisingly enough. Um,
Right.
and so, in listening to some of Jonathan's lectures and everything, I thought, oh, I wonder if there's an OCA church near me, because I knew he was part of the OCA. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty medieval. So, I stumbled into this little this little church, and the priest was so generous with me and took me around the church, showed me, the whole scheme of the icons, um, and so I did, some research there. And then, my kids were teenagers, mid-teens, not
Hmm.
really ready to stand on their feet for a couple of hours,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, so we moved on, and then the pandemic hit, and for 2 years we still kept stumbling, trying to find a place to land. And then afterwards, I just felt like, you know what? Why don't we go there again and try that again? So I started going to Vespers, and I just felt this real rest, this real sense of
Hmm.
calm and rest, and the ceasing of striving to make it happen. And so we decided to give it another try for Divine Liturgy, and all of a sudden it just clicked. Like all four of us were like, "Yes, this
Right.
is this is it.
Wow.
This is right." Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So my kids are 19 and 17 now, and it was a pretty instant yes. So
Glory
we're
to
we're
God.
quite
Glory to
happy.
God.
Yeah.
Well, thank God that you landed in the church and in the bosom of the church. I wanted to go back
Mhm.
to one thing that you said because
I did say
as
a
a
lot there.
priest, I no the one phrase that you used really caught my attention, and that is you said these churches were preaching to people that weren't there, or
Yeah.
something to that effect.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that? Because I think for those of us that are in parish life, and we are, we're always trying to be aware of how we present ourselves and the gospel and worship. What do you mean by they were preaching to people that weren't there?
Yeah, it kind of always felt like a little over eager, in the desire to fill the pews and
I see.
to make people
I see.
happy, to make
Right.
people happy, to make people feel like, oh, uh, we'll cater to you, we'll make you feel um,
Right.
have this emotional experience. Now, listen, I'm all for the emotional experience. I don't disparage that. that kind of heart connection. I think that's really important.
Sure.
But when
Sure.
we came into the Orthodox Church, the overwhelming sense was, oh, this isn't about us. Like, this is what we know from the scriptures is going on in heaven right now, like is going on around the
Right.
throne of God right now.
Right.
And we get to come and participate in it.
Indeed.
There, I think because there were no screens, there was no sound system, there weren't lights and
I
a
see.
welcoming committee and all these things. It just was like it was the true expression of itself. And
Interesting.
the understanding was too that this has been going on for 2000 years uninterrupted.
Right.
And so we just get to jump in the stream and for 2 hours on a Sunday, I call it getting a beauty infusion, um,
Love it. I love that.
and it's
I'm
just,
stealing that.
yeah, we're just transported to the greater
Yep.
reality. We're
Yep.
the the whole, the whole dog and pony show of life is just interrupted
Mm-hmm.
for that time, and it's like, oh no, this is real. This is what
Mm-hmm.
matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
The kingdom of God is breaking through the nonsense of the world for sure. Well, speaking
yeah,
of sort of that reality, in a lot of in your books, including this new one, Berliners, which just came out, the the subject matter is always quite serious, I notice. So you're
yes,
talking about the division of East and West Berlin, surviving the Holocaust, the plague,
right.
of all things. These are
Hmm.
very kind of weighty and serious matters. So why not write fluff? I mean, doesn't fluff sell? Doesn't light material that is engaging and maybe a little sexy and so forth? And you seem to be taking on quite serious issues. So, what about these topics inspires you to write and to draw so beautifully?
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I'm not a fluffy person. Some might call me prickly. Um, Although I try to use my prickliness to help people. I
Mm-hmm.
don't, my desire is not to hurt anybody or crush anybody,
Mm-hmm.
but being a Staten Islander, I'm a bit of a skull cracker, Um, um, but I think, look, I did not have anything like a light, easy life beforehand.
Mm-hmm. Right,
Before, yeah,
right,
and
right. You
also,
said that.
so I'm trying to work through a lot of questions that I have myself. So in my first novel, it was, how do people survive horror and trauma? Because these were
Interesting.
questions that I had of my own life. Um,
Wow.
so, I think that look, I think we like to think that teenagers, because I ostensibly write for teenagers, although we could talk about that later. How conscious I am of that kind of thing. But
Yeah, I would love to.
yeah, um, I there are a lot of kids like me who really have it rough and have it way rougher than I did even. And really, for me, books books were my way out.
Hmm.
They gave me other options to think about, ra- you know, beyond what was just in front of my face. And I would really lose myself in stories, more
Mm-hmm.
so pictures than the words. So I actually come to writing pretty late. I didn't write my first novel until 20 2011. I began writing a story that became my first novel, which is not published yet. um, so the questions that I had when I started writing were already pretty fully formed and mature in a sense. They weren't the
Interesting.
musings of of like a precocious 12-year-old or something like that, you know?
Are
Um,
are they the books? I don't want to sort of go all psychological here, but are they the books that um, young teen Vesper would have been inspired by and maybe would have learned
yeah.
from?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. They're really I think my generation too did not have young adult as a genre. Uh, really the first we had the Babysitters Club and a couple things like that, or the odd
Right.
book like The Outsiders or something like that. But by and large, as an industry, it didn't exist until the Harry Potter series came out, and that was well after my time. Um,
Right.
and so, I read a lot of classics, and I read, Dracula and Frankenstein and the Once and Future King, and things like that that were a bit more heady and literary. So those are the things I like to
Hmm.
read. So You know, I
I
I talk to kids, when I visit classrooms and stuff, it's like 90% of the kids either don't really want to read or they want to read something like, the latest vampire romance or something,
right. Right.
But
Right.
I don't I don't think that I know enough about writing, to be honest with you, and to be able to just whip something out that's light and fluffy.
Interesting.
I don't know if that
Well,
makes
I
sense.
mean,
Yeah.
you clear. I mean, you obviously know what you want to do because you are achieving that, and you have achieved it in Berliners. And I, because you, one quick question before we go to a break.
Sure.
You mentioned Harry Potter, which of course is this global phenomenon. I'm curious, does the fantasy genre, does this interest you at all? I mean, not, not casting aspersions on it, but is this something that you feel is useful to young people, that entire genre?
I do. I read a lot of fantasy in high school. I'm not really interested in writing it, at least in the way that it is as a genre. I would say A Cloud of Outrageous Blue is skirting the edges of fantasy. It's more, I would say, historical magical realism than fantasy.
Interesting.
And I see that book as being part of a trilogy. So I hope I get to write that someday. But um no, fantasy I think is actually a really great genre for young people. I do. It expands the possibilities. I think sometimes in the young adult genre, it's the realistic fiction that can be a little bit it can present some problems, let's say.
Mhm. Yeah, especially if it has a political or moral overtone that is not
Right.
necessarily encouraging the best of our young people. Well, thanks for that. I appreciate it. All right, we're talking with Vesper Stamper, author and illustrator, and she just released a new book called Berliners. We'd encourage you to go to your favorite bookseller and check that out. It's a tremendous book, very compelling read. Honestly, I would say it's perfectly suitable for adults. And I think you'll enjoy it very much, as well as the beautiful illustrations in here. Vesper, we're going to go for a quick break. We want to encourage our listeners, give us a call or send us a text. We already have a text message, 412-206-5012, or call us at 1-855-AF-RADIO. Maybe you've read Vesper's works before. You'd like to speak with her. Maybe you are an aspiring illustrator or writer. You can check out her website at vesperillustration.com to learn more about her works there. But we are going to continue the discussion with her. We're going to talk now more about her writing and where that's all going. You are listening to Ancient Faith Today. We will be right back.
Father Tom will be back in a moment. In the meantime, the lines are open at 855-237-2346. Don't go away.
The Ancient Faith Christmas shop is now open and is packed with beautiful gifts for your loved ones of all ages. The Ancient Faith store is your one-stop shop for Orthodox gifts and resources. Whether you're looking for cards, calendars, icons, books, jewelry, ornaments, or home altar supplies, you can choose from many options. Find gift ideas for everyone on your list when you click the Christmas Shop tab at store.ancientfaith.com.
We're back with Ancient Faith Today and Father Tom Soroka. Give us a call at 855-237-2346. Here once again is Father Tom.
We're back and we're talking with Vesper Stamper, and we're talking about her new book, Berliners, just published by Knopf. Vesper, I wanted to ask you, you also do the illustrations in the book, and you have a very particular style. I think, when I look at I'm not a visual artist, but when I look at the artwork that you've done for your other books, as well as books where you are only the illustrator, you have a very sort of particular style. I'm not sure how to describe it. How would you describe your artistic style from other types of styles?
I'm not sure how I would describe it. I would probably say that in the novels, I'm trying to play with sort of an archival sensibility. Something that feels like it's of the time that it's coming from. But I think that what I'm trying to do is come at the text from a kind of side door. I don't see myself as as illustrating something like a storyboard from a movie where it's just like, oh, the text says this, and then you see that immediately in the picture. I think of it more like visual poetry. So and I see my writing also as poetic prose. So I think whatever I'm doing, I'm really trying to get to the inner state of the character, or of the situation, or of the mood, the atmosphere that the characters are operating in.
Interesting. Visual poetry.
I know that doesn't,
and
yeah, I know that doesn't really answer your question about style,
well,
because I kind of buck against the notion of style. I think of it more like each artist has their own visual vocabulary that they've been sort of following for their whole life, probably.
Sure, fair enough. And are there certain visual artists that inspire you, or that that you feel are particularly worthy of studying?
Yeah, I mean, ironically, I've always been very, very interested in iconography and manuscript illumination. That's a huge influence on me. Always has been.
Interesting.
Yeah, and like the early Flemish painters are really important to me. But in terms of contemporary illustrators, my friend Felice da Sala is a huge influence on me. Other illustrators like Isabel Arsenault, Carson Ellis, Matt Forsyth, people who are working in almost kind of like a naive style, but with a real understanding of picture making and very sophisticated visual language.
Yeah, I like that description of a naive style. I see in your work a very clear illustration of what's happening there, with great detail about certain things in the room and for the time and so forth. But it's not overly complex. It gets right to the heart of what is being portrayed there. Since you brought up iconography, I do notice that on your Facebook page, you were exploring iconography. Is that something that you are continuing to look at?
Yeah, and I think maybe you mean my Instagram page, because I'm not on Facebook. But
I'm sorry, your
yeah.
Instagram page. Yeah.
I try to stay away from Facebook and Twitter as miles away if possible, but just stick to the pictures.
Wise.
Yeah, so I took a little online course in iconography about a year ago, during lockdown, learned a little bit of it. It's something that I really would love to do. I don't have enough time. It's frustrating because I know that our church needs icons, and I know that I could do it. um, but I just, the books take up so much time. So I'm trying to squeeze in wherever I can, like a little bit of technique. And I've become friends with Father Silouan Justiniano in Long Island. He's an amazing, amazing iconographer. So my husband and I really study his work as sort of
Oh,
like the
that's great.
pinnacle of where we would like to go. He's a brilliant colorist, and actually had him come in to talk to my class that I teach at School of Visual Arts. So, and our icons in our church are painted by Father Andrew Trebekov, and I feel that we have a national treasure. So
Absolutely.
it's pretty marvelous
Absolutely.
to be surrounded by that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Good. Good. Well, that's I think maybe God is kind of orchestrating all of that and putting the right people and the right influences in the right place. So may he guide your talents in that
And my
direction
time.
also, and your time. Yes. The
Yeah,
constant problem of all humans. All right.
that's right.
Let's talk about how you go about writing a story. For instance, with Berliners, how did you come up with this idea? Is it were you, and I don't mean to be naive about it, but did somebody come to you and say, you should write a book about this? Or is it, I've always had this idea in my head? How did that start for this particular book? And then how do you build out that story?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the best projects that artists do are always born out of their own curiosity. Even if it's something that's assigned to you, which illustrators obviously get assigned work all the time, you have to find your way in that makes you curious enough to keep going. And so with Berliners, it's actually a spin-off of my first book, What the Night Sings. So in that book,
Mhm.
I was really uh, curious about the post-Holocaust experience for Jewish survivors, for Jewish teenagers in particular. But that inevitably begets the question of what happened to the perpetrators. Where did they all go? And especially because I was
Mm,
born in that country. And
mm,
what was my father doing over there at his U.S. Army base? Why was I born in a
mm.
U.S. Army hospital at the height of the Cold War? So these were just questions
Interesting.
that I felt, I had to answer for myself. And I wanted to know, because my father's deceased. So, and I never met him. So, these were things that I
Oh, wow.
couldn't ask him about. I had to go finding the answers for myself. And so I was asking these questions. And then I was sitting in church one day, and the reading was the story of Cain and Abel. And all of a sudden, it all clicked. And I thought,
Wow.
yes, this is the story that I'm going to tell. And so, what inevitably happens whenever I'm working on a project is that when I follow that line of curiosity, it's like breadcrumbs through the forest. And inevitably, it always leads me on the right path. I
That's
almost never hit a
amazing.
dead end. Yeah, it's kind
That's
of an
amazing.
amazing serendipity. And so now
I heard
that
this.
same thing is, yeah, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say that phrase that you said, that it was like breadcrumbs on a path and there was a serendipity. That reminds me of something that Benedict Sheehan said about when he was writing the Divine Liturgy,
Hmm.
and now this Vespers, is he said that somehow the notes from a musical standpoint just sort of unfolded, and he didn't really have to kind of think about, you know, where things were going and should I do this and should I do that. He said it just seemed obvious where that was going. So that's fascinating that your
Yeah,
creative process kind of took the same path.
and that's not to say that there's not an awful lot of frustrating hard work in the middle of all of that.
Sure.
It's not just like,
Sure.
oh, things fall out of the sky. A lot of it comes through just, uh, a lot of deep reading, a lot of exploration and
Right.
trying to find answers, a lot of drawing, a lot of filling sketchbooks, doing bad
Yeah.
drawings, all of those things. But if it's all born out of the questions that you can't seem to get out of your head, it will lead you to the right place.
Yeah, you were very detailed in the book about different foods and different things that they were doing and places and where streets were and all kinds of details that clearly you must have looked up and researched to make sure that they were accurate.
Yes, I'm a research junkie.
Oh, I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So speaking of Berliners, we had a text message that came in and it says, I'm currently reading your book, Berliners. The book
Oh,
is
thank you.
fascinating on several levels. It's tackling serious, relatable issues like communism and socialism, a family in crisis, and the interplay between the brothers. If it is not too much of a spoiler, can you talk a little bit about Rudy and the lake scene where he imagines harming his brother Peter? It does
Mm.
seem a bit like Cain and Abel, but there's also another level in which Rudy is rejecting Peter because of his lack of acceptance of what he sees as the socialist ideal. So you had already mentioned Cain and Abel, and I guess the question is, can you unfold that scene a little bit? What was your inspiration for him wanting to drown his brother, imagining he's going to drown his brother?
Yeah. So I'm glad this reader picked up on that, because that, Berliners doesn't lay exactly onto Cain and Abel. There's some liberty with it, but that scene in particular is meant to reflect Cain and Abel's argument in the field. And there's a lot of speculation over what they were exactly arguing about,
Right, right.
and why that argument in particular caused Cain to rise up and kill his brother. And so a lot of the reading that I did was actually from Jewish commentary on Cain and Abel, because there's some of the best commentary on it from those sources. And so one of my
Interesting.
main sources was this Targum Jonathan, also called Targum Yerushalmi, and it talks about the reason Cain was so upset was because God basically caught him out in the fact that he was phoning in his sacrifice. He really
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
giving God his best, and we've heard that kind of
Right.
thing before. But
Sure.
then in terms of the actual conversation that they have in the field, it's that Cain becomes a functional atheist. He says, because my offering wasn't accepted, then everything's arbitrary and nothing I do matters.
Mm,
And there's no judge. It says there's no justice, there's no judge, there's no
right.
afterlife. Whatever I do, it doesn't matter. And Abel says, no, this isn't true. There is justice. And, all you have to do is really give God your best and your offering will be accepted. And this is what enrages Cain, And so I wanted to explore with Rudy and Peter, um, what kind of flights of fancy can occur in a person's mind when they get so full of resentment and
Right.
so full of, the unwillingness to see reality when that reality says that you aren't you aren't who you think you are. And so I do think that in terms of Rudy's uh, enchantment with socialism and communism, that is a system that sort of plays into some of those worst instincts of, I deserve to have everything, without putting all of it in.
Right. I love that your book has so many different layers of, for lack of a better word, drama or at least tension,
Mm-hmm.
because you open sort of before, or how the boys were born, right, coming out of this terrible war, and then immediately we go to when they're teenagers, and all of a sudden you're seeing the family complexities, you're seeing the political complexities, you're seeing the personal complexities, you're seeing the romantic complexities, and all of this interplay is really brilliant. It's the novel is not really how might I say, sort of it's very rich in the
Thank
way,
you.
when you're reading someone like Dostoevsky or whatever, you almost need a scorecard to figure out, now this person is this and this person is that, and these relationships are here. And I sort of get that sense in this wonderful book that there is a lot happening, and people are very complex.
Yeah.
Rudy is complex. He's clearly he's never been the star of the family. He's never been the star son of the family. He's always sort of his parents are sort of like having to make excuses for him, but he finds his meaning in this empty philosophy, right? This empty political
Right.
philosophy. And then here's Peter, and he has all of this talent and all of this success. And just all of the different relationships are so rich. And I guess my question is, what do you hope for the reader to walk away with after they've read the book? What is the ultimate message that you want the teenager or young adult or adult that is reading this book? What do you want them to learn and know and feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think that any piece of art that tries to present human beings as sort of simplistic creatures,
Right,
who can be easily categorized into one thing or
right.
another is really just agitprop. And I'm not interested in that kind of endeavor. Um, People are complex, and we have this battle within us. We have the Cain and Abel battle within us. Everyone does.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, we we battle the good that we want to do and the evil that keeps nipping at our heels. And
Right.
so, that if there's one takeaway, I would want the reader to just understand that they are both Rudy and Peter, and that they have a
Mm.
choice in which dog they want to feed, let's say. There's the inscription in the beginning of the book, in the frontispiece of the book, is from Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the
Yes.
famous quote that the line dividing good and evil runs down every human heart. It's not about
Yes.
classes or about political parties or about groups. It's about you, you know, you and me
Yes. Yes.
standing before God, having to give an answer. Um, so yeah, and I'm not trying to be preachy about that. I'm just trying to lay it out. It's in all my work. I'm not trying to take a side in any way. I'm just trying to present you with the platter, you know, and
No,
you can go and
I
take
think,
from the platter and have dinner,
well, honestly, there's nothing worse than a book, for instance, um the there's a religious genre, right? Like religious
Yeah,
fiction, Christian religious
right.
fiction. And it is, I mean, maybe not all of it. And certainly there are some outstanding books I like that Ancient Faith has
Sure.
published, like Icon.
Hmm.
Icon is a magnificent book. I don't know if you've read that, but it's very rich in the way that it portrays this problem of possible persecution and so forth. But anyway,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
some religious fiction is very flat and very preachy, and
Hmm.
frankly, I think it's a turnoff. And
Yes.
it is what we get mocked for. It's what Christians get mocked for. And what you're
Right.
doing is you're really raising the level of thought and the level of complexity to say, this is reality, folks, and
Yeah.
it's maybe ugly, but it's also part of us.
Well, I think I really trust my readers. I really do. And I think it's the same way that, God calls us to see everyone that we pass on the street as imbued with his image and as like just full of radiant glory of his image, right? Well, I have to see my readers that way too. That they will like if I trust them, they will be able to pick up what I'm putting down. You know, I don't need to hit them over the head with it. It's like there is a sense of general revelation, that if people are presented with a paradigm of how the world really is, of how reality really does lay itself out, people will get it. Not everybody, but
Right.
I'm appealing to that. I'm appealing to that understanding that I think that every human being has about what they really know deep down is the truth about human nature and about themselves.
Right. Indeed. Indeed. I did want to ask you also, because we're coming near the end of our program.
Oh, that's too bad.
So, well, I appreciate your time, and I really do hope that people will go out and seek you out, seek your work out, because it's really just very engaging, but also again very enriching. So, you are a person of religious conviction. You believe in Christ. You have embraced the Orthodox faith, but you're kind of working in this artistic world and in the secular publishing world and so forth. Have you run into any issues or problems with this sort of not contradiction, but um, I don't know. Are have you run into any problems?
I have to say I haven't.
Good.
Possibly because of the way I met the Lord, which was in art school when I was so young. I've just had, uh, you know, I've never seen a contradiction between my art and my faith, and I don't expect other people to as well. I think if I'm
Mhm.
doing my job and I'm working with integrity and I'm treating people with dignity, I think the people that I work with understand what I'm about. I've never been shy about my faith, um, and I feel very very privileged to have the level of trust that people give me in the industry. So
Good.
you know,
That's
yeah,
wonderful. Excellent.
I know that
Um,
people
la-
do have issues with that, but thank that hasn't. I've been trying to figure that out with other artists and try to understand
right.
and hear their difficulties, but that hasn't been my experience.
Good. Good. Well, thank God.
Hmm.
Last question. So I want to ask you, what plans do you have for the future? Are you working on anything right now? Can you give us a little hint if possible? And
Yeah.
specifically, are you looking at any kind of Orthodox themes or involving any, I don't know, saints or church history or something like that? Do you have any interest in that?
Well, I would have interest in it for sure. Right now, I'm working on my memoir, which is a fairy tale that I'm writing. And I'm working with Nicholas Kotar, who I think you might know. We're doing a
Absolutely.
Kickstarter together. Yeah. So I'm illustrating his novella. So if you go to Kickstarter and look him up, you'll find our book. So I've got, a few things coming down the road. I'm working with Jonathan Pajot on some fairy tale stuff, and but right now, I'm just focusing on illustrating picture books. I'm taking a little bit of a break from the writing because of the anguish of the subject matter, to be honest.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Hmm.
there's lots of stuff coming down the pike. So if people want to follow me and keep in touch, you'll know what I'm doing.
That would be great. And obviously, all of your books are available on Amazon, or as I said, you can go to vesperillustration.com and everything is there. Go check her out on Instagram and, all of those wonderful things that you're doing. And we look forward to a lot of really, really good things from you, Vesper. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much.
All right. Before I share a few final thoughts, I want to offer my sincere thanks to Vesper for joining us tonight. Thanks to Matushka Trudy for engineering the program, to our show production assistant, Melissa Graff, for her work behind the scenes, for everyone that is listening in, and for those who are calling in. I wanted to read just some of the reviews that are listed on the back of Vesper's book. And because I really want to encourage you to go check this book out. And it says, for instance, this is from Daniel Nayeri. This intimate portrait of two brothers split by the Berlin Wall in 1961 feels like a parable, a warning, a mirror of our modern times. Kristen Hanna calls it a tour de force. Kirkus Review says will leave readers gasping. And then finally, Booklist, a very well-known publication, says beautifully written, richly imaginative, and graced with fully realized characters, a feast for fans of historical fiction. And that's our show for tonight. Remember to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/ancientfaithtoday. Share out our program after that's posted. Give us your feedback and contact us with any ideas or topics that you might want to hear about. Join us next Tuesday evening for another edition of Ancient Faith Today. Good night, everybody.